Stoicism for anxiety. Calming the modern mind with ancient Stoic practices for stress, fear, panic, and worry. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus for mental health and emotional resilience by Aurelian Hart. Introduction. The air in Rome during the summer of 64 AD did not smell like the usual mix of dusty stone, roasting meat, and salty Tiber water. Instead, it smelled like a campfire that had grown too big to handle. It was a thick, heavy scent that stuck to the back of the throat. The sky above the city was a strange bruised purple, lit from below by a flickering orange glow. The great fire had begun, and it was eating the city alive. In the narrow streets, the sound was deafening. It wasn't just the roar of the flames. It was the sound of giant wooden beams snapping like dry twigs. It was the sound of stone walls groaning and then crashing into the dirt, sending up clouds of hot ash. People were screaming, running in circles, clutching whatever they could carry. A mother held a cooking pot. A man carried a single wooden chair. They were moving, but they had nowhere to go. The smoke was everywhere, a thick gray blanket that turned the noon sun into a pale, ghostly coin. In the middle of this nightmare, the Emperor Nero was looking for someone to blame. He needed a target to keep the angry, frightened crowds from turning on him. Panic is a hungry beast, and it usually looks for a scapegoat. The city was a pressure cooker of fear, grief, and what-if thinking. People were losing their homes, their shops, and their lives. Every shadow seemed like a new threat. While most of the city was falling apart, a small group of people stayed calm. They didn't have magic powers. They weren't ignoring the fire. They were simply practicing a way of thinking that had been built for exactly this kind of moment. These were the Stoics. One of them, a teacher named Musonius Rufus, didn't run away in a blind panic. He didn't sit on the ground and cry about how unfair life was. He knew that the fire was outside of his control, but his reaction to it was entirely his own. The Stoics stayed to help. They stayed to teach. They showed the people of Rome that while a fire could take your house, it didn't have to take your mind. They believed that the human spirit had a secret room inside it, a place that no fire could reach and no emperor could break. They called this the inner citadel, the war inside your head. Most of us aren't standing in a burning city today. We aren't dodging falling Roman pillars or running from a frantic emperor. But if you listen to the way your mind talks to you, it might feel just as loud. You might be sitting in a quiet office or lying in a soft bed, but your brain is shouting. It tells you stories about things that haven't happened yet. It plays movies of you failing at your job, losing the people you love, or making a fool of yourself in front of strangers. This is the what-if loop. It's a mental fire that never seems to go out. What if I lose my job and can't pay the rent? What if that weird look my friend gave me means they actually hate me? What if the world is becoming too dangerous for my kids? What if I'm just not good enough to handle what's coming next? This is the modern epidemic of anxiety. It's not a physical fire, but it leaves the same kind of ash. It makes your chest feel tight. It makes your heart beat like a trapped bird. It makes you feel tired even when you've slept because your mind spent the whole night fighting ghosts. You might feel like you are a prisoner of your own thoughts. You react to every email, every news headline, and every change in someone's tone of voice as if it's a life or death emergency. You are living in survival mode, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You want to be calm. You want to be steady. You want to feel like you are the boss of your own life, rather than a leaf being blown around by the wind. This book is about building your own inner citadel. It is about moving from being a prisoner of the mind to becoming a Stoic fortress. The promise of the fortress Stoicism is often misunderstood. People think it means being a robot or having a stiff upper lip while you suffer in silence. They think it means you shouldn't feel joy or sadness. But that's not what the ancient Stoics taught at all. Stoicism is actually a practical toolkit for the mind. It is a way to sort through the noise of the world and find the few things that actually matter. By the time you finish these pages, you will have a new way of seeing the world. You will be able to shut down the noise. You will learn how to spot a what-if thought and stop it before it turns into a panic attack. Stay steady in the storm. Whether the economy is shaky or your boss is grumpy, you will have an internal anchor that keeps you from tipping over. Stop people-pleasing. You will learn that other people's opinions are like the weather. They happen, but they don't define who you are. Handle physical stress. You will find in-the-moment tricks to lower your heart rate and clear your head when things get intense. Live with purpose. You will stop just getting through the day and start living a life based on your own values. This isn't just a nice idea. It's a system that has been tested in the hardest places on earth. It was used by an emperor leading a nation through a plague. It was used by a slave who was treated like property but kept his mind free. It was even used by soldiers in prison camps to keep their spirits from breaking. If it worked for them, it can work for you in your living room, your car, or your office. A story of two worlds. To see how this works in real life, we have to look at someone living through it right now. Meet Elena Rodriguez. She lives in Austin, Texas, and her life looks very successful from the outside. She is 34 years old and works as a senior logistics manager for a global shipping firm. If you need 1 million tons of grain moved from one side of the ocean to the other, Elena is the one who makes it happen. She is married to Mark, and they have a 4-year-old son named Leo. But inside, Elena feels like she is vibrating. It's 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and she is sitting in her home office. The only light comes from the blue glow of her laptop screen. On the screen is a spreadsheet with thousands of rows. Somewhere in the middle of the ocean, a ship is delayed. It might be 2 days late, it might be 4. Elena's chest feels heavy, like someone is sitting on it. Her mind is already 5 steps ahead. If the ship is late, the client will be mad. If the client is mad, I might lose the account. If I lose the account, the company might cut my bonus. If I lose my bonus, we can't pay for Leo's preschool. What if I'm a failure? She is catastrophizing, building a tower of disasters out of one small delay. She believes that if she worries enough, she can somehow prevent the bad things from happening. Her worry feels like a shield, but it's actually a weight. She is exhausted, but she can't sleep. She is physically there in Austin, but her mind is 5,000 miles away in a storm at sea. Elena thinks her problem is the ship. She thinks her problem is the client. She thinks her problem is the spreadsheet. But her mind is 5,000 miles away. She is about to discover a book by an old Roman emperor that will change the way she breathes. She is going to learn that while she can't control the ocean, she can absolutely control the person steering her own ship. In the chapters coming up, we are going to walk the path that the great Stoic masters laid out for us. We will look over the shoulders of 3 main teachers. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who had every reason to be stressed, but used his private journal to stay kind and calm. Seneca, the wealthy advisor who had to deal with a dangerous boss and the fear of losing everything. Epictetus, the man who started life as a slave and proved that no one can ever truly own your mind. We will start by learning the 3 pillars of the Stoic mindset. These are the rules that help you decide what to care about and what to let go. We will dive deep into the dichotomy of control. This is the most powerful tool for anxiety ever created. It teaches you how to draw a line in the sand between what is up to you and what is not up to you. Once you see this line, your stress will start to melt away. We will explore why we suffer more in our imagination than in real life. We will learn how to practice for bad times so that when they actually arrive, they don't feel scary anymore. We will even learn how to look at the stars to make our big problems feel small and manageable. You will see Elena try these things out. You will see her fail, and you will see her get back up. You will see her go from a woman who has a panic attack in her car before daycare pickup to a woman who can stand in a chaotic warehouse and feel a deep, unshakable peace. The goal of this book isn't to make your problems disappear. Life will always have fires. Ships will be late. People will be rude. The weather will be bad. The goal is to change who you are in the middle of those things. You are about to build your fortress. Chapter 1: 3 Pillars of the Stoic Mindset. A man sits in a small, drafty tent near the edge of the Danube River. Outside, the ground is a soup of freezing mud and melting snow. It is the year 170 AD, and this man is the most powerful person on the planet. He is Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome. He is old, his body is failing him, and he has spent years fighting a brutal war he never wanted. His friends have died from a plague that is sweeping through his empire. His soldiers are tired. He is exhausted. Instead of sleeping, he leans over a small table by the light of a flickering lamp and writes to himself in a private journal. He isn't writing about battle plans or taxes. He is writing about how to keep his mind from falling apart. Almost 2,000 years later, a man stands in a freezing cold line in a concentration camp during World War II. His name is Viktor Frankl. He has lost everything: his family, his career, his clothes, and even his name, which has been replaced by a number tattooed on his arm. He is surrounded by death and cruelty. Yet, as he looks at the guards, he realizes something that changes his life. He realizes that while the guards can take his body and his food, they cannot take his ability to choose how he thinks about his situation. He discovers a tiny space of freedom inside his own mind that no one can touch. Fast forward to 2008. An investor sits in a high-rise office in New York City. The computer screens in front of him are glowing red. The stock market is crashing. People are losing their homes, their life savings, and their jobs. Around him, people are screaming into phones or staring at the walls in total shock. But this investor doesn't panic. He takes a slow breath, looks at the data, and asks himself what he can actually do right now. He doesn't focus on the billions of dollars vanishing into thin air. He focuses on his next move. These three people lived in different worlds and faced different problems. One was an emperor, one was a prisoner, and one was a businessman. But they were all using the exact same tool. They were using a mental filter to separate the chaos of the world from the peace of their own minds. This filter is the foundation of Stoicism. It is not about being a robot or having no feelings. It is about building a fortress inside your head so that when the world gets messy, you stay solid. The Emperor's Morning Battle. Marcus Aurelius did not want to be a warrior. He was a bookworm who loved philosophy and quiet study. Fate, however, handed him a crown and a series of disasters. He spent the last decade of his life living in military camps, surrounded by the smell of wet horses and the sound of sharpening swords. Every morning, he woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. He felt the same morning dread that many of us feel today when we look at our phones and see 100 unread messages or a news cycle filled with gloom. Marcus knew that if he let his mind focus on how much he hated the cold, how much he missed his home, or how unfair the war was, he would break. He would become a bitter, angry leader. To survive, he developed a system of 3 pillars, or disciplines. These were the rules he used to judge every thought that entered his head. He didn't just think these rules. He practiced them like a soldier practicing with a shield. He called these the 3 disciplines: desire, action, and assent. The first pillar, the discipline of desire, was about his goals. Marcus realized that most of our anxiety comes from wanting things we can't have or fearing things we can't stop. He wanted the plague to end. He wanted the war to be over. But he couldn't make those things happen just by wishing. So, he trained himself to only desire his own character. He decided that the only thing truly worth wanting was to be a good, fair, and brave person. If he was a good man, he had won, even if the war was still going on. The second pillar, the discipline of action, was about how he treated other people. Even when he was tired and surrounded by people who were ungrateful or mean, he believed he had to act with kindness and justice. He saw himself as a small part of a big human family. His job was to do his duty to that family, no matter how he felt inside. The third pillar, the discipline of assent, was his most powerful weapon against anxiety. Assent is a fancy word for saying yes to a thought. Marcus believed that we don't see the world as it really is. Instead, we see the world through our own impressions or snap judgments. If a messenger arrived with bad news, Marcus's first thought might be, "This is a disaster." But he would stop himself. He would tell himself, "The messenger is here. That is a fact. But the idea that this is a disaster is just my opinion. I don't have to agree with it." The kitchen counter crisis. In a sun-drenched kitchen in Austin, Texas, Elena Rodriguez is living her own version of a Roman war camp. It is 7:30 a.m. Her 4-year-old son, Leo, is currently screaming because his toast is cut into triangles instead of squares. Her phone is vibrating on the counter with a high-priority alert from the shipping warehouse she manages. A massive storm in the Atlantic has delayed 3 global cargo ships, and her boss is already sending unknown texts. As Elena reaches for her coffee, her sleeve catches the handle of the mug. She watches in slow motion as the dark liquid splashes across the white counter, drips onto her tan slacks, and puddles on the floor. Usually, this would be the moment Elena's brain catches fire. She would feel the familiar heat of a panic attack rising in her throat. She would think, "My day is ruined. I'm a mess. I can't handle this job. Everything is falling apart." But this morning, Elena has a small book of Marcus Aurelius's writings open on the table. She remembers the discipline of assent. She looks at the coffee on her pants. She takes a breath. The coffee is on the floor. She says to herself quietly, "That is the fact." She refuses to add the second part, the "this is a disaster" part. She looks at the vibrating phone. "The ships are delayed," she notes. "That is a fact. My boss is frustrated. That is also a fact." By refusing to assent to the idea that these facts are bad or evil, she keeps her heart rate down. She is practicing the pillar of assent in real time. She still has to clean the floor. She still has to fix the shipping mess. But she is doing it with a clear head instead of a shaking heart. She realizes that the spill doesn't have the power to make her miserable unless she gives it permission. Understanding the 3 pillars. To build your own mental fortress, you have to understand how these 3 pillars work together. Think of your mind like a high-tech building. The pillar of desire, your compass. This is about what you aim for. Most of us aim for outcomes. We want the promotion, we want the date to go well, we feel constant anxiety. The Stoic flips this. You aim for virtue. You aim to be the person who works hard, regardless of the promotion. You aim to be the person who is kind, regardless of how the date goes. When your goal is your own behavior, you can never be disappointed. The pillar of action, your map. This is about how you move through the world. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. Stoics believe we are all connected. When you act with justice and fairness, you are following this pillar. It means you don't step on others to get ahead, and you don't let your own fears stop you from helping someone else. The pillar of assent, your filter. This is the security guard at the door of your mind. Every day, thousands of impressions try to get in. You're going to get fired. That person hates you. You aren't good enough. The discipline of assent teaches you to stop those thoughts at the door. You look them in the eye and ask, is this a fact or just a scary story I'm telling myself? You only let the facts in, the scary stories outside. The space between. Viktor Frankl, while suffering in the camps, discovered exactly what Marcus Aurelius was writing about. He later wrote that between a stimulus, something happening to you, and your response, how you react, there is a space. In that tiny space lies your power and your freedom. If someone cuts you off in traffic, that is the stimulus. Most people jump immediately to the response: anger, yelling, and a ruined mood. They skip the space. They let the outside world pull their strings like they are a puppet. A Stoic lives in that space. When the stimulus hits, the spilled coffee, the mean email, the scary health news, they pause. They use the 3 pillars to evaluate the situation. Desire. Do I want things to be different than they are right now? Accept the reality. Action. What is the most helpful thing I can do in this moment? Act with virtue. Assent. Am I making this out to be worse than it actually is? Stick to the facts. This is why the 2008 investor was able to stay calm. He knew he couldn't control the stock market. Desire. He knew he had a duty to his clients to be rational. Action. And he knew that a falling line on a graph was just data, not a personal attack on his soul. Assent. The inner citadel. The goal of practicing these three pillars is to build what the Stoics called the inner citadel. In the ancient world, a citadel was a fortress built on the highest point of a city. When an enemy attacked, the people would retreat into the citadel. The walls were thick, the food was stocked, and the people inside were safe, no matter how loud the enemy screamed outside. Your mind can be that fortress. Anxiety is like an invading army. It tries to break down your doors with what-if thoughts. It tries to climb your walls with physical symptoms like a racing heart or sweaty palms. But when you have your three pillars in place, the army can't get in. They can scream that you might lose your job, but your desire is to be a person of integrity, and you can do that whether you are employed or not. They can scream that the world is unfair, but your action is to keep doing good anyway. They can scream that everything is a disaster, but your assent tells you that disaster is just a label you refuse to use. Elena is starting to feel the walls of her citadel getting stronger. As she mops up the coffee, she realizes that the disaster she felt 5 minutes ago was just a ghost. It wasn't real. The only real things were the mop, the floor, and the choice she made to stay calm. Finding your footing. It is easy to be calm when everything is going well. It is easy to be a philosopher when you are sitting on a beach with a cold drink. But Stoicism wasn't made for the beach. It was made for the mud of the Danube. It was made for the stress of a warehouse manager in Texas and the fear of a prisoner in a camp. The beauty of the three pillars is that they don't require you to change your life. You don't have to quit your job, move to a monastery, or buy anything. You only have to change how you process the things that are already happening to you. When you start to use these pillars, you notice a shift. You stop being a victim of your circumstances. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How can I use this to practice my character?" This doesn't mean life becomes easy. Marcus Aurelius still had to fight the war. Elena still has to deal with the shipping delays. But the suffering starts to vanish. Pain is inevitable, but the anxiety we add on top of the pain is optional. It is a choice we make when we agree with our scariest thoughts. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and knowing that no matter what happens, no matter who is mean to you, what breaks in your house, or what the news says, you have a filter that can handle it. Imagine knowing that your peace of mind is tucked away in a fortress that no one else has the key to. This is the promise of the Stoic mindset. It is the ability to stand in the middle of a storm and feel as though you are standing on solid ground. It is the realization that while you cannot control the wind, you can absolutely control how you set your sails. As we move forward, we will look at the specific tools you can use to build these walls even higher. We will look at how to tell the difference between what you can change and what you must accept. But for now, just look for that space between what happens to you and how you react. Look for the tiny gap where your freedom lives. That is where your new life begins. You are no longer a person who is pushed around by the world. You are a builder. You are constructing a mind that is steady, a heart that is brave, and a soul that is unshakable. The mud might be deep, and the wind might be cold, but inside your tent, the lamp is lit, and the walls are holding firm. Chapter 2. Prohairesis, the power of choosing your response. In the 1st century, every person in the Roman Empire lived by a simple rule. Your status determined your peace of mind. If you were born a slave, you were a talking tool. You had no rights, no property, and no say over what happened to your own body. If your master was kind, you might have a decent life. If he was cruel, your life was a nightmare. Everyone knew that a slave was the most powerless creature on earth, while the emperor was the most powerful. It was common sense. Happiness was something that happened to you if you were lucky enough to be born into the right family or have the right master. One man proved the entire empire wrong. His name was Epictetus. He wasn't born with that name. It is simply a Greek word that means acquired or bought. He was a slave in the household of a very wealthy and very mean man named Epaphroditus, who served as a secretary to the Emperor Nero. In this world of gold and marble, Epictetus was a nobody. He was physically weak and walked with a limp. The most famous story about Epictetus involves a moment of extreme cruelty. His master, in a fit of rage or perhaps just out of a sick sense of boredom, began to twist Epictetus's leg. Most people would have screamed. They would have begged for mercy. They would have been filled with a mix of physical agony and mental terror. But Epictetus had been studying philosophy. He looked at his master and said quite calmly, "If you keep going, you will break it." The master kept twisting. A loud snap echoed through the room. The bone was broken. Epictetus didn't cry out. He simply looked at the man who owned him and said, "Did I not tell you it would break?" For the rest of his life, Epictetus walked with a heavy limp. To the outside world, he was a broken man. But inside, he had discovered a secret that made him more powerful than the emperor himself. He realized that while his master could break his leg, his master could not break his will. His master could control where he slept and what he ate, but he could not control what Epictetus thought or how he felt about his situation. This is the core of a concept the Stoics called prohairesis, the great myth of the remote control. We often live as if our emotions have a remote control, and we have handed that remote to the rest of the world. We think, my boss made me angry, or this traffic is making me stressed, or the news is making me anxious. We believe that external events, the stuff that happens out there, have a direct wire into our brains that forces us to feel a certain way. This is the great myth that Stoicism seeks to bust. The Stoics argue that there is no direct wire. Between the event and your emotion, there is a tiny gap. In that gap sits your prohairesis, which we can translate as your power of choice or your reasoning faculty. Imagine you are standing in a long line at the grocery store. You are tired, your feet hurt, and the person at the front of the line is arguing over a coupon. The event, a slow line and a difficult customer. The myth, the line is causing your frustration. The truth, your judgment that this line should be faster or this person is wasting my time, is what causes the frustration. Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of them. A broken leg is just a broken leg. It is a physical fact. Whether that broken leg is a tragedy or an opportunity to practice patience is a choice. This sounds impossible when you are in pain, but Epictetus lived it. He proved that even in the most extreme circumstances, the mind remains a fortress that can only be entered if we open the gates. The Suez Canal and the line in the sand. Elena Rodriguez sat in her home office in Austin, her eyes glued to a digital map of the world. A tiny red icon on the screen showed a massive container ship. It wasn't moving. It was wedged sideways in the Suez Canal, blocking billions of dollars in global trade. For Elena, as a logistics manager, this wasn't just a news story. It was a career-ending disaster. Her phone had been vibrating non-stop for 3 hours. Her boss, a man known for his short temper, was leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Elena, we have 50 containers on that ship. If they don't move, we lose the contract with the national retailers. Do something." Elena felt the familiar cold coil of panic in her chest. Her heart was racing, and her breath was shallow. She felt like she was drowning in the desert heat of Egypt, thousands of miles away. She felt powerless. She felt like a slave to that stuck ship. Then she remembered the small book she had started reading, The Enchiridion by Epictetus. She remembered the dichotomy of control. She took a piece of paper and drew a vertical line down the middle. On the left side, she wrote, "Not in my control." On the right side, she wrote, "In my control." Under "Not in my control," she listed the wind that blew the ship off course, the tugboats in Egypt, the tide of the canal, and her boss's blood pressure. Under "In my control," she listed her next breath, the email she was about to write to the retailers, the alternative shipping routes she could research through the tip of Africa, and the tone of voice she used when she finally called her boss back. As she looked at the list, something strange happened. The physical symptoms of her anxiety didn't disappear instantly, but they stopped feeling like a command. She realized that she had been spending 100% of her mental energy on the left side of the paper. She was trying to worry the ship out of the sand. The canal is not in my